It starts with a single phone call. A life is cut short, and a nation is ignited. Today, we're going to walk through the tragic case of Pinar Gultekin, a story that isn't just about a horrific crime, but about a fight for justice that is still going on.
You know, so often these horrible stories start with something completely normal, almost mundane. On July 16, 2020, Pinar, who was a university student, is on the phone with her sister. Just a quick chat. She says, "I'm on my way to a meeting." And then, nothing. That ordinary conversation was the last time her family would ever hear her voice. It became a final, chilling goodbye that nobody knew was happening.
To really get why this case caused such outrage, we first need to understand the life that was stolen. So let's talk about who Pinar Gultekin was, the young woman at the absolute center of this storm. Pinar was this really interesting mix of tradition and modern ambition. She grew up in a small town, with a family that really valued education. But she was also this incredibly vibrant person, just full of life, a natural leader. She'd moved to the city of Mugla to chase her dreams, an economics degree, plans to study abroad, learn new languages. She was so close to graduating. Her whole future was literally right there in front of her. So this is where things take a really dark turn. How does something as simple as being a regular at a coffee shop, how does that spiral into a dangerous, deadly obsession? Well, like a lot of students, Pinar had her go-to spot, a cafe she'd hang out at. The owner was a 32-year-old married man named Jamal Metin Avshi. And at first, everything was totally normal. Just the usual polite chat between a business owner and a regular customer. Nothing out of the ordinary at all. But this is the scary part. It wasn't some sudden explosion. It was this slow, methodical, and chilling escalation. It started with just polite customer service. Then he starts following her on Instagram, uninvited. Then he gets her phone number, pretending it's for business reasons. And that's when the floodgates open. The texts become constant, personal. He's asking where she is, who she's with. It keeps getting worse, to the point where he's actually physically waiting for her outside of her classes. I mean, can you imagine? For Pinar and her friends, this must have been absolutely terrifying. And Pinar did exactly what you're supposed to do. She was crystal clear. She set boundaries. She stopped going to his cafe. She cut down on communication. She did everything she could to create space. She said no, plain and simple. The problem was, he just wasn't willing to hear it. So her trying to pull away, it didn't work. In fact, it seemed to just make him more aggressive, more persistent. And this relentless pursuit, well, it all came to a head on the day she disappeared. Okay, so let's walk through the timeline. July 16th, Pinar is seen on CCTV with Jamal at a shopping center. After that, her phone goes dark. The next day, her family, obviously frantic with worry, files a missing person report. Now, the police moved really fast here. Using the security footage and cell data, it all pointed directly to Jamal. By July 21st, after trying to lie his way out of it, his story completely crumbled. He confessed, and then he led the police to where he had hidden her body. So when he confesses, he tries to spin this story that it was all a terrible accident. That they got into a struggle, and he just panicked. But the forensic evidence? Oh, the evidence told a very, very different story, a much more premeditated and horrifying one. And this is where his whole story just completely falls apart. Look at this. He claims she stopped breathing during a struggle. The autopsy finds soot in her lungs. That's cold, hard proof she was still alive when he set the fire. He claims he acted in a state of shock, but he'd gone out and bought gasoline and cement beforehand. That's not shock, that's planning. He even had the nerve to claim self-defense. But her injuries told the real story, a brutal beating and strangulation. The evidence didn't just contradict his story, it completely demolished it. So you'd think, with such clear, overwhelming evidence, the court case would be pretty straightforward, right? Well, this is where the story takes another tragic turn. The fight for justice became its own harrowing battle. And a huge part of that battle centered on this legal concept called unjust provocation. What this means is a defendant can argue that the victim did something to provoke them into committing the crime. And if the court agrees, they can get a much lighter sentence. Now, in cases of violence against women, this is, as you can imagine, deeply controversial. It can be twisted to argue that a woman's rejection, her simply saying no, is somehow a justification for a man's deadly violence. The legal journey that followed was just a painful roller coaster. In 2022, Jamal was sentenced to just 23 years, not life, because the court shockingly accepted his unjust provocation defense.
Public outrage was so huge that an appeals court overturned that lenient sentence in 2023. So there's a glimmer of hope. But then, in a stunning reversal in early 2025, a higher court brought back the original reduced sentence. The whole thing is just back and forth. And right now, prosecutors are launching yet another review.
Now, all of this legal chaos, it didn't just happen quietly in a courtroom. It was the spark that ignited an absolute firestorm across the country. A family's private grief was about to become a national movement. I mean, the second that initial 23-year sentence was announced, a wave of fury just swept across Turkey. People saw it as a profound injustice. Protests erupted in Istanbul, Ankara, Izmir, all the major cities. People flooded the streets demanding that the legal system start protecting women, not their killers. And right in the middle of all of this, Pinar Gultekin's name and her face became a powerful symbol. Her photo was everywhere at rallies against femicide, hashtags demanding justice for her flooded social media. Her story stopped being just one crime. It became a glaring example of a justice system that many felt was failing its women. Her case was the rallying cry to close these legal loopholes like unjust provocation that allow killers to get off with lighter sentences. And this all brings us to the fundamental and, frankly, chilling question at the heart of this entire case. It's a question that echoes from the courtrooms to the street protests. If a woman's no can be legally twisted and interpreted as a provocation that lessens the punishment for her own murder, what does that truly say about justice?